Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome. Today we're going to do a deep dive overview of Iwo Jima, the block-based solitaire wargame that plays in under an hour from Worthington Publishing. This game covers the US-Japanese battle for the island of Iwo Jima during World War II. It was a 36-day campaign and it's the only island campaign in World War II that saw the US attacking forces suffer more casualties than the defending Japanese. Let's jump in and take a look. Here's the game laid out in front of us. And as I mentioned, it is a solitaire game. It's also important to mention that it's only playable as the US side. So the bot and the card-driven system is going to manage the Japanese forces. Also, another big thing to say about this game, if you're familiar with the Worthington's game Tarawa, this uses a nearly identical system. There's a few rule changes that we'll talk about that are different between the two. But if you have played Tarawa and know how to play that game, you're 90 to 95% of the way there to being able to come in and jump right in and play this game. Now, gameplay length is about an hour or less. Historical length, the Iwo Jima campaign lasted 36 days, so that's really kind of the historical envelope that we're looking at, roughly 1 month. Turn length in the game is a little bit abstract, but each turn the Japanese play a card and there's 30 cards in the deck, so roughly perhaps you can think of 1 turn equaling 1 day. And the unit scale for this, the Japanese is slightly abstract, but the US is based on regiments. However, as we see in front of us, this is a block-based game, and 3 blocks constitute 1 US Marine regiment. Let's talk a little bit about the mechanics that we're going to see in play here. This is very much a card-driven game. So the US forces, you're going to have an action you can take, and then you're going to be able to play 3 cards during your turn. And the Japanese AI opponent is going to be driven by the cards that you draw, and that's going to dictate what actions they take during a turn. Cohesion and exhaustion of the US forces is really important to manage and model if you're going to win at the game. By the way, I've seen a ton of people talk about how hard it was to win at Tarawa, so I expect this will be an equally challenging situation to win at. But as they say, sometimes the joy is in the losing. I think this is going to be a very fun game to lose. The game's complexity is modest. We'll take a look at the rules in a moment, but basically as the US player, you're either launching a new wave, rotating fresh troops to the front and bringing exhausted ones out, moving somewhere on the island, attacking, or regrouping your forces. So there's really not a ton of complexity to this game. Dice drives combat, so combat is a hit-based system for both sides where you're throwing dice and determining how much damage you do. There's also some subtle things like bunkers that are in here, and the cards add a lot of the historical flavor. The flavor text on the cards kinds of adds a lot of the history behind the campaign as you're playing through it. Let's take a look at the rulebook. It is a very modest 12 pages. The back page here has some kind of combat aids here too, some of the rules. Also, I should mention, Japanese banzai attacks are modeled in the game. But as we look at the rules here, it's 12 pages with big text, 2 columns, a modest amount of graphics here, nothing incredibly wild. But again, this is not a complex game. I've read through, I'd say 80% of the rules. It's all pretty clear. Seems like it's going to be a straightforward game to play. If I were to give this a complexity rating, I would say 2.5 out of 10. So very straightforward, easy to learn. I think it's going to be a game that's going to be very easy to get to the table. There is just the one scenario in the game too. So there is not multiple scenarios or multiple options for gameplay. The only variation that you have here is an optional rule that lets you adjust the difficulty by adding or removing the number of cards in the Japanese bot's deck. So if you have more cards, you've got more time. It makes it a little bit easier. If you remove some cards from the Japanese deck, you've got less time, which makes it harder for the US forces. As I mentioned in the intro, this again is a block-based game. The Japanese forces are yellow. There's another bag of these, so there's twice as many. These are the US Marines. We'll take a look at the stickers momentarily. Bunkers are also modeled in the game, so there's locations on the map to put those, but a lot of these smaller blocks here are used for some of the tracking tables on the map here, as we'll take a look. These are nice and big, about 1/2 inch by a little bit less than 1 inch, all wood, nice clean paint job, so very high quality. Looks like they're going to work great. Here are the stickers for the blocks. So we have some down below here for the Japanese units. Then we have the Japanese ones here designated with their unit names on them. Over on the left side, we have the 2 sets of Marine counters. Likewise, I should clarify, there are 2 sets of stickers for the Japanese. You pick which one you want. You don't use both of them. Likewise, for the Marines, you have ones here with the the soldier on them, the icon of the soldier on them, or one with kind of the Marine Corps designation here. And you can pick which one of these two sets you want to use to kind of stylize your game. Really nice and clean. I mean, there's a few here to put on blocks and things like that, but I think it's going to look really nice once they're all put together. Combat, as I mentioned, is dice driven, so it's a little bit of a dice chucker. You get 7 6-sided dice to handle and manage combat in the game. Let's take a look at the cards. There are 2 decks of 36 cards each, 1 deck of 36 cards for the Japanese forces and 1 for the US Marines. What we're looking at right now are 8 of the cards from the Japanese deck. And basically each card has a name, and then these are the rules for what you do to execute that card. So after the US go in a turn, you're going to pick one of these cards off the Japanese deck, execute what it tells you to do, and then down the bottom here, it has historical flavor text as to how it relates to the actual historical battle. Now, although there are duplicate actions here, so there are like 3 infiltration cards, I did notice a neat touch down here is that the historical flavor text on even the same cards is different. So it's pretty cool. Even though you've got similar cards, it's giving a different part of the history. I love cards that have room on them for historical information like this because it really helps kind of set you in the scene of the battle and add interesting facts and elements to the game as you're playing through there. But again, we can see here's a fire attack one, and there are a number of fire attack cards. So that's going to be a very frequent Japanese action. But again, the historical text is different. And here's the one that triggers the banzai attacks too. There's a few of those in the deck as well. Here's a look at 8 cards from the 36 card US deck. Very similar to the Japanese deck in terms of thematic style. We get the name of the card, what it allows you to do in a turn, and then historical flavor text down below. And like the Japanese deck, the historical flavor text is unique to each card. Also down at the very bottom of the US cards, it tells you when you can play that, because as the US player, you get 1 action per turn, but you also get 3 cards to play during the turn, and you can play those cards at any point in the turn, either your part of the turn or during the Japanese part of the turn, if the card itself allows you to do it. For example, this dug in card here says playable during the US Marine Corps turn. So you can't play this one during the Japanese part of it. This one immediately proceed to the Japanese turn. So you can play your 3 cards, and then each each round you draw back up to 3 cards as the US. Really like the design, the photographs here, just kind of adding in the element of history. Really clean and fresh design on these. I like these a lot. Lastly, here's a look at our 17-inch by 33-inch game map. We can see the map area in the middle here, and then on the bottom right-hand corner, we've got spaces for deck management, the Japanese draw, Japanese discard, Marine draw, Marine discard. Top right has the combat results for the dice. So there are 3 different mechanics really for dice. You've got the Japanese fire attacks and Japanese banzai attacks, and then the US Marine Regiment's attacks. Each of those, the results of the dice determine slightly different things, and those are all explained in the top right corner. And then down on the bottom left, you're tracking the cohesion and exhaustion levels of the US forces with this here. So the player aids are baked right into this map. Now, this is really kind of a point-to-point map, and you can see in terms of stacking and things like that, there's 3 spots here for US forces, so they're going to be the 3 parts to a regiment that are going to be here. Likewise, Japanese have spots. I believe these are bunker spots, and then 3 spots for Japanese forces as they are defending. And you're moving from each one of these areas to another, and these numbers give them priority for the Japanese AI to act in certain situations. Mount Suribachi up here on the top of the island. So just a really clean design. It's really fresh. Gives you kind of that rocky feel of Iwo Jima. I should also mention that this is a very nicely done mounted map. So really nice thick cardboard, feels really good. I think it's going to be very durable and to play on that way. The question I imagine some people have is how different is this game rules-wise from Tarawa? The rule section does address that, and so as we're looking at a little bit more of a close-up here of the map, the card numbers dealt during the setup are different. The special landing dice that you use for landings are a little bit different. And then Mount Suribachi here has a different mechanic around it where the US get 1 less die when they're attacking that mountain position. And then the US Marine Corps can play any number of cards during their turn. Apparently that was different during Tarawa. So again, probably 95% of the rules element is similar to Tarawa. I imagine the map, of course, is very different from Tarawa. This is probably a good moment to mention victory conditions. Basically, you're trying to get, as the US, you're trying to get more victory points than the Japanese. 1 to 5 victory points is a marginal victory. 6 to 9 is a moderate victory. 10 plus is a smashing victory. If you have less victory points than the Japanese, you lose. And you get victory points. You get 2 victory points for each position that you occupy. You also get 1 victory point per Japanese card still in the deck when you've conquered all of the island positions. The Japanese, however, get 2 victory points for every U.S. Marker eliminated, each U.S. third of a regiment eliminated, and you get a victory point also for exhausted regiments. And then you get 3 victory points at the end for each island-controlled position. So it does sound like a tall order for the U.S. forces. I'm curious to see the difficulty on this one. Again, as I've seen a lot of people play Tarawa, and maybe if you've played the game, you can played Tarawa, you can share your experiences with it, in that it is a very challenging game to win at, but a fun game to lose. So I've always wanted to play Tarawa. I have not had a chance to get it yet. So I'm really excited to give this second version in the series a shot. If you've enjoyed this overview and you like World War II solitaire games, you might also want to take a look at our gameplay complete playthrough of Pacific War 1942 Solitaire from Worthington Publishing, where you can play the entire Pacific War campaign in about 20 minutes.